Hello and welcome to Remember, the show all about histories, mysteries, and did you know that Peter Butterworth, who was a famous actor in the UK in the 50s and the 60s, was rejected from a role in a prisoner of war escape film, even though he was auditioning to play himself?
He couldn't even be cast as himself? Too close to the role. Too close.
Too close to the role. Apparently he'd gained too much weight to be convincingly...
It's from all the pancake syrup.
That's...
I know it's Mrs. Buttersworth, so it's a little...
Mrs. Buttersworth.
It's a little different.
Yeah, that's actually different. That kind of doesn't even work, that you did that. It's different.
So wait, I'm sorry. He gained too much weight to play himself.
Yeah, he wasn't a convincing, I'm in a prison.
Oh, I got it.
Actually, Peter Butterworth was part of a bunch of escapes. The wooden horse escaping, where they built a tunnel underneath a vaulting horse. He also dug a tunnel with spoons underneath a bed in one camp, and he was involved in the Great Escape itself.
He did as himself in real life, or as an actor in roles he played?
In real life, he was in these things. He was part of all these escape attempts.
Why did he have to escape from so many different things?
World War II?
Fair enough.
Joining me is prisoner 69420, Paula Deming.
Oh,
and I'm
rude.
And I'm known only as the Shadow of Berlin, the Hawk of the Western Front, or as the other guys call me in the squad, hey, you're gonna get us killed. Or at least that's what I think they were saying. I was playing the trombone at the time.
Matthew. Yeah, that's Matthew, everyone.
This week, that's probably my favourite joke I've ever written in my entire life, Paula, just so you know.
I liked listening to you laugh at it before you delivered the punchline.
Look, it's not a perfect system. This week, we're talking about one of the most outlandish bluffs of the Second World War. A harebrained scheme of duplicity to distract from what the Allies thought would be the decisive move of the war on the Western Front.
Over under, how many episodes of Remember do you think will have something to do with World War II?
Many. Many, indeed.
I'm going to say 30%.
You aware of how much crazy nonsense went on during World War II? So much. Also, for the YouTube people, and for the people that are the other people, the listeners, I would call them, if I sound a little bit different or look a little bit different, it's because I'm in a hotel room in Taiwan right now.
Sassy.
Yeah, so the sound is a bit different.
Why are you in a hotel in Taiwan, though? Do you have other content that our listeners should check out?
I've got a travel channel. It'll be linked. Please, go for it. It's called Yesland.
Yesland Travel Vlogs. Go check it out. He's going on adventures and still making the podcast while he's at it. That's dedication.
It's a lot of work. So, it's spring 1944. The war in Europe had turned in favour of the Allies, especially in places like North Africa, Italy, as well as victories by the Russians over on the Eastern Front. The Axis powers were on the back foot and bracing for the next big right hook. Think of it this way. A few heavy blows have been hit, one to the chin, one to the cheek, another bloodied the Nazis' nose, and what was needed and what the Germans were trying to avoid is the knockout punch that everyone knew was going to be swung.
KO'd.
In hindsight, we know that the war still has a full year to go, but a major European invasion was coming from the Allies. The most important question in the world at the moment was, of course, where was it going to begin? This was information that the Allies couldn't let out. The biggest secret in the world that also happened to involve around 160,000 troops, 7,000 ships. It's quite literally a very, very big secret.
That's a lot of people. How do they keep it a secret? I guess not all those 160,000 whatever troops knew what their orders were until probably like they needed to do them immediately. You know, like you don't give out that kind of information.
Oh, no.
Just to everyone involved until that's very much on a need to know basis.
Very much a need to know basis. And even though you are going to be fighting and dying in this battle, you do not need to know where it is going to happen until you're on the boat.
Until you're like there. Until you're disembarking.
So counterintelligence was going to play a big part. Precious lies covered in truth. Deceptions, plans, plots, ploys. To use the boxing analogy, you need to throw a lot of feints to hide a real knockout. And to continue with this bizarre things that happened in World War II, things like Operation Mincemeat.
So gross.
Which involved the British. In 1943, they floated a dead body of a homeless man dressed as a Royal Marine to Spain after planting false documents on it to divert the Germans from Sicily to instead to defend Greece and Sardinia, even though, of course, Sicily was the real target.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Also,
it helped.
Poor homeless guy. And also, why did they call it mincemeat? I can't get over it. It's a horrible thing to call it, I feel like.
Well, blame Ian Fleming. He was part of it, the guy who wrote James Bond.
Like he knew anything real about spying.
Well, he did. He knew a lot about spying.
Like that's why he wrote spy stuff.
And it's one of these schemes that we'll be talking about today, Operation Copperhead. So what's needed at this stage of the war is to do anything to weaken and divert forces away from where the D-Day landings were going to happen. This involved in itself a lot of manpower. Different parts of the English coast were littered with fake troops and vehicles. There was a whole army of people working on making cardboard tanks and wooden aircraft.
Cardboard tanks.
That from the sky looked like the real thing. They had people faking radio communications, organising all these landing sites just to throw the Germans off.
Well, and remember in our Noor Inayat Khan episode, there was that theory about that one guy being like a triple agent? The one who betrayed Noor's circuit, and then because they thought he was a double agent for Germany, but then they were like, no, he's actually working for MI5, MI6, I can't remember now. And they were like, no, that led to people dying. Well, it was because the theory is it was to throw the Germans off of D-Day.
By the time you're a triple agent, just kill yourself. That's where I'm at with it, honestly. Who can handle the stress?
That would be a lot to keep up with. I couldn't even remember if it was MI5 or MI6. And this person had to remember 3 different spy organizations that all had probably 3 of their own aliases in each one. So good luck.
I told Hans Gruber I'd be here on Tuesday, but I told Billy Thorne that I'd be there on the weekend. Oh dear. So Operation Copperhead was just part of this grand deception, and it began in Naples. An officer called Dudley Clark, who happens to be the commander of something called A-Force.
A-Force.
Which was a self-contained counterintelligence unit. And Clark was watching a movie called 5 Graves to Cairo, which starred a man called Miles Mander. And Miles Mander looked a lot like someone very important to the war effort. That being Field Marshal Montgomery, the commander of the Allies in North Africa and the commander of the invasions of Italy and Normandy, and one of the most recognisable people in the world at that time. He's the British version in some ways of the American 5-star general George Patton.
Okay, interesting.
You can't be more important in the British Army without being Winston Churchill. This look-alike gave Dudley Clark a great idea. If they could hunt down Miles Mander, they might be able to use him to confuse the Germans. Only problem is, Mander is way too tall to fool anyone, but the idea was too good not to pursue, so it was time to hunt down a new double. So they head to the offices of some talent agents to look through the listings of headshots, trying to find someone, and when they turn to the page to see M.E. Clifton James, they are speechless. Because I tell you what, Paula, M.E. Clifton James looks identical to old Field Marshal Monty.
So Field Marshal guy has 2 doppelgangers, is what we're saying?
When you look at him, you go, oh, he looks like a aged British person. It's not that difficult to look like him, I don't think.
I'm just imagining, like, one day I get a call from Central Casting, which is the big organization that does all of the extras casting.
Any excuse to mention that Paula's an actress.
And they're like, hey, we have a project for you, but it's not actually a movie. It is a highly dangerous spy mission. And I'm like, will it give me a voucher? And they're like, yes. And that's an LA actor joke for anyone listening who gets it. You got to get your 3 vouchers from doing background work, and then you can join SAG.
Look, can I put it on my reel?
Copy credit meal. That's what they'll pay you in. And the copy will go on your reel, and you made no money at all.
You got paid in exposure, Paula, which is the last thing you wanted during World War II, is any exposure at all.
Like, actually, I would like no copy credit.
Please don't mention my name, for the love of God.
It's a spy mission.
So Clifford James had already been made aware of this, that he looked just like Field Marshal Montgomery. He'd already had his photograph taken a couple of times because they thought he was the man himself. He was actually born in Perth in 1898 in Australia. He was, as many were, that unlucky age to have been able to have served in both the First World War, then worked with the Royal Fusiliers fighting actually at the Battle of the Somme, which makes the list as one of the worst places to be ever. And then he had this love for acting, but never found much success. And then World War II rolls round and he re-enlists.
Wow. He should have been capitalizing more on his ability to do this impression of old Monty. You know, if you're a lookalike, start doing birthday parties. You know what I'm saying? Start doing corporate events.
Well, from what I understand, that he had at some times done a few walk-ons to the stage to pretend he was Montgomery, but he did it just as a bit.
Oh, and then he was like, just kidding. It's just me, your old pal Cliff.
To book Clifford James onto this role, they actually get David Niven to call him. Have you ever heard of David Niven?
Seems vaguely familiar, but I don't know if that's just like my podcast host brain who likes to pretend like I know what you're talking about a lot of the times when I don't.
I think my least favourite thing in podcasts is when the other person says, oh yes, that's this that happened in this time, or this. It's like, you know that because you've got the show notes in front of you. It's not because you know.
Yeah, and guess what? You know? I don't have any show notes in front of me.
We don't do that.
Remind me, David Nivens, and I'll tell you whether or not I actually did know that or no.
I've always known who David Niven is, but you will have seen him in the Pink Panther films, as well as many fantastic movies. He's what my mom would call a real Hollywood movie star. But at the time, he was Lieutenant Colonel Niven.
I'm looking him up.
You'd recognize him if you saw him.
Oh, yes. I do recognize David Niven.
But at the time, he was Lieutenant Colonel Niven. But he was already famous from before the war, and someone that Clifton would have reacted to and known. I have some short personal family history here now. David Niven was my grandfather's commanding officer in World War II.
No way!
And one time, my granddad held him at gunpoint because he didn't identify himself on one dark, dreary night.
He was doing his job.
Apparently, one of the only things he said to him was, friend or foe, as he pointed a gun at him.
He's like, I'm here. Listen to my voice. Don't you recognize it from the pictures?
It doesn't matter. You gotta identify yourself.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, he was following the rules.
I will mention also, my grandfather didn't tell many World War II stories, but that's the only one that I think I know. The other stories he has about World War II destroyed him as a human being. So...
That's the fun one. That's the one you pull out at parties, and the rest you shove way down because he was definitely not getting therapy because no one was at that time. So
my granddad was a pacifist. So when he went to war, it destroyed him because he had to kill essentially German children. Yeah. Let's be blunt about it. Back to the fun.
But he got an autograph. Worth it.
So Niven calls up Clifton James, tells him that they're filming some army training films or something similar to that, and that they want him to come and perform in them. Only when he turns up to hear more about it the next day, he gets recruited into Operation Copperhead and has to sign a bunch of top-class confidential paperwork, and off he goes, telling his wife that he will be away for about a week filming. He first goes to spend time on Montgomery's staff, just looking at him and trying to learn his gestures and mannerisms, which he does really, really well. But the thing that the most different between the men is the confidence. Field Marshal Montgomery presented and handled himself like he was one of the most important people in the British Empire.
Yeah.
Beloved by his men who would do anything, including die, when asked to serve the crown. And this is a confidence that is very hard to replicate. Clifton, on the other hand, was a very nervous man.
He was an out-of-work actor who had fought in multiple wars as a grunt.
Yeah, and he also drank and smoked, two things that Monty didn't do, which was going to present its own challenge.
I'm picturing, if this is foreshadowing, I have ideas of where this might go.
It's after these initial observations that it's arranged for the two Montys to meet in person. This meeting only lasts a few hours. It was meant to be time for Clifton to really understand and learn some of the intricacies of Monty's movements, but a lot of the meeting seemed to involve Monty just encouraging Clifton that he had what it took to complete the mission.
Oh, that makes me really like him. Oh, Monty. Yeah. Should I name my firstborn son Monty after him? Just from this one anecdote?
Name him Clifton.
No, Monty is the one who is encouraging this nervous guy. Forget Clifton. Monty, the real hero.
And this is my son, Field Marshal.
Field Marshal.
You didn't think just Marshal? No. I thought Field Marshal.
I mean, I do have a cat named Commander Shepherd.
You do have a yeah. That's not a nickname. That's the cat's full name.
That's
Commander
his legal
Shepherd. Name. This wasn't a safe thing to be doing. Montgomery was a huge target. He was the architect behind some massive Axis defeats. He was a core source of inspiration and morale to the troops. Not only that, if Clifton is caught, it's not just a small, oh well, you tried to fool us. It actually gives the enemy information. It crosses off locations that the D-Day landings might be. Everyone knew that they were on their way. It's the location that's the big secret. Not only that, Clifton would be interacting with people who knew Montgomery, and no one outside of this tiny select few knew that he was the fake.
Did he have to interact with his family? They're like, and here's your final test before you go into the field. Have dinner with Montgomery's wife and children. And if they can't tell,
Montgomery's wife.
And if she can't tell the difference, you're cleared for the field.
And he looks back at Montgomery and he says,
yeah.
He looks back at Montgomery and says, you want me to do this? And Monty says, anything for Britain. Just make sure she has a good time.
Just make sure she bears a son. For England! Sorry.
Wow, this got dark. The other thing is, Clifton didn't even really know who he was working for. He believed it was MI5, which itself was at the time a secret organisation that wasn't meant to exist. But he was working for A-Force, which is a kind of secret behind a secret. Also, A-Force.
It's kind of like A-Team, which is...
It's very much like the A-Team.
The problem is the A-Team came later, so it's not A-Force's fault. But now, in hindsight, we look at it and we're like...
It's a bad name. It's a bad name. Let's just be real about that.
A-Force. What would you call your Secret Service war team?
I'd call us the Dead Men.
I think you should call them the Adjudicators, obviously.
No, I'd call us the Dead Men. And everyone says, when you walk in, it's dangerous. And he'd go, it's okay. I'm already dead.
And that's how you know. That's like the secret handshake.
Oh my God, The Dead Man is a great name. That would be such a cool film.
I can't believe you didn't even crack a smile at me saying that you should call them the Adjudicators. I thought you loved puns.
No, I'm angry about that one. I'm angry. That's terrible.
Move on.
It's pretty good. Off the top of your head, Adjudicators, pretty good.
Thank you.
But it's time to go fool some Nazis.
Nothing I love more than making a bunch of Nazis look foolish.
You're looking foolish.
Bunch of wankers. I said it.
You did.
I said it.
They informed some double agents to make sure that the Germans knew that Monty was going to be heading up the D-Day landings, wherever they were. Monty was going to be in charge, and then they very publicly fly Clifton to Gibraltar. That's that little speck of land on the south tip of Spain that is, for one reason or another, technically part of Great Britain. We'll do an episode on it. First, they make Clifton do a few test flights to make sure he doesn't get airsick, because they've not done that yet. They have to allegedly sober him up a little bit as Clifton sneaks some liquor on the flight with him to calm his nerves.
You're not allowed to bring your own personal alcohol on a plane. You gotta get it from the duty-free shop first.
It's true. Everyone put your guns through this thing. Oh, I know you've all got guns. But before he actually has to get on the flight, just kind of in the nick of time, Clifton mentions something that no one had noticed. He was missing a finger and Montgomery wasn't, which was a big problem.
No one noticed that he was missing a finger up to this point?
It was a big problem because of all the handshaking that was on the itinerary, so they have to quickly make him a prosthetic one.
How did no one notice? They skipped the most important part of the audition, which is when you do your hands. You literally have to do that in commercial auditions.
Commercial auditions make sense.
Yeah, you don't have to do it for anything else.
Are these okay? Are these fine? YouTube, these okay?
If he had done that, they would have known about the finger. How did no one notice yet?
Is this okay? No, it sure isn't. Well, the thing is, he lost his finger in the First World War, and because of that, he kind of adapted a self-consciousness about it seems. So he often would hold his hands behind his back and walk around like he was Jadzia Dax.
Right.
From Deep Space Nine.
He also spoke Klingon, which was another way he was like Jadzia Dax on Deep Space Nine.
Well, most people thought it was German. Very similar languages. It's on this publicity trip that Clifton begins to do what he's meant to do. Pretend to be Monty, but also drop some not so subtle hints that the invasion force will be landing in southern France instead of where it was headed, which was northern France. My guess is that this would position the Germans too far behind them and that they'd be, in theory, not able to catch up with the huge invasion in time for it to roll over Europe and
also
onwards to Berlin.
Close to the truth, which would make it maybe easier to believe or harder to disprove. My thought though is, was it not like too obvious? You know, like was no one like, I don't think if this was the real plan, they'd be saying it out loud like this.
No, it was very subtle little hints about the plan.
Okay.
And he wasn't saying it to some German lads.
He's just like on the street being like, hello, Field Marshal Montgomery here. We'll be invading in southern France. Thank you for the newspaper.
He was saying it to people who he could say things to in confidence, but knowing that there were other people around that probably were spies, because they told the people that they thought were spies that Montgomery was going to be there. And it makes sense, right? You get the German force to go all the way to southern France, so that they are no longer between northern France and Berlin. So the whole German force is way behind them, so they can just roll into Berlin. But that's the plan, right? That makes a lot of sense. He does this all perfectly. Everyone knew that the Germans had spies in Gibraltar, and they knew that at least one of them would be overseeing and hopefully overhearing all of this, and then go on to send his false information back to Berlin. Or her false information, let's be honest.
There were female spies we've already talked about.
Lots of them. Let's be honest. You can't trust women.
That's the takeaway.
But just in case these spies aren't there, they even invite a man named Ignacio Perez, who's a Spanish guy they knew were working for the Germans. So they invite him to the governor's house where they knew Clifton and the governor were meeting, just to hang out. Hey, you want to come over? He's like, my luck's in. I'm a spy. This is great for me. He doesn't say that out loud, I imagine. Clifton's then flown to Algiers, the capital of Algeria on the Mediterranean coast, to again be very publicly in Algiers. And that's mission complete for him. No one is the wiser, and the Germans had taken the bait. After that, he's sent to a safe house in Cairo, where he kind of is forgotten about. He told his wife he'd be going away for a week. He can't tell anyone where he is, and he just has to sit there in Egypt and wait for almost 6 weeks to be flown home where he was. And when he gets home, he can't tell anyone where he's been, and he can't tell anyone what happened.
What does his wife think?
Who knows?
Oh, poor thing. It's like, why haven't I heard from him? I mean, it's wartime, so I guess you're like, oh, what a nightmare. To be like, he's going to be back in a week. 5 weeks later, you're like...
Yeah, she probably thought he was dead.
Yeah.
But we all know about this.
Well, I know about it now, but I didn't know about it before.
It's public knowledge, let's put it that way. It's open for you to know if you so choose. But the reason for the whole trivia thing at the start with Peter Butterworth not being able to play himself in a war movie, because even though this was all top secret, the story gets out really quickly after the war. Oh. Clifton is talking about it in earshot of a journalist who publishes the story. Jeez. He should have been arrested.
Damn actors.
He'd signed the Official Secrets Act, but it was such a feel-good story, a great morale boost in the papers, that they let him get away with it. And it's a good way, they think as well, to let Clifton get some recognition for a mission he'd been on, that he'd done fantastically at. And there'd already been a movie made, The Man Who Didn't Exist, all about Operation Mincemeat.
Ugh. I hate that. I'm never going to get over it. I hate that name. I hate that it's called that.
And they thought that this story was actually less gruesome than Operation Mincemeat, the Man Who Didn't Exist story. And they thought that this would be more uplifting in what were really hard times still. So Clifton James also gets to do what he always wanted to do. And he stars as himself in the 1958 film, I Was Monty's Double, based on his story and his book on the mission.
Take that, Peter Butterworth.
Yeah, screw you and your Carry On films. He also reprises his role of Monty, playing that part in the film as well. I mean, who else was going to do it? The film stars John Mills, another actor who you could call a real classic British movie star, and it's a great film. It's played up a bunch for some comic relief and some extra drama thrown in for good measure, but it's pretty true to the events, and I think a fantastic way to honour a great man.
So it worked.
Yeah.
So everything worked. The Germans went to southern France. And then D-Day happened in northern France, and it was all okay.
Well, in part, it was a myriad different missions like this that helped weaken the German front, essentially, before the D-Day landings. Wow. But the D-Day landings were certainly hard fought for. Then Operation Market Garden, and it was a lot of death and very difficult beachheads and all that. Yeah. But, I mean, the Allies got to Berlin and won in the end, but it took a long time. But this stuff worked and it helped, and I just think it's fantastic that Clifton James got to do this mission, get the recognition for it, but then he got to star in a real famous film. I Was Monty's Double. It's a film that's on TV still to this day. It's a great film, and he's great in it, and it's just wonderful, I think.
So what you're saying is, to jumpstart my acting career, first I need to go on a spy mission.
Yes.
Then I need to make sure everyone knows about the spy mission. Then stars myself in the movie about the spy mission.
I think it can only work. There's only... How could it go wrong?
I can't think of a single way it could go wrong. So I will be calling up the CIA as soon as we're done recording. Let them know that my services are on offer.
The Cocaine Import Agency. Love those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Remember. You can also listen to these episodes like regular old podcasts. If you'd like, you can find them at whatever your podcatcher of choice is. Is there a bit of history you would like to know more about? Or do you have your own bit of personal history that's particularly interesting? You can send that to us at rememberremembershow@gmail.com, and we just might talk about it on a future episode.
Did your granddad ever almost shoot a famous actor? Tell us about that.
If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe right here on YouTube. Leave us a like, leave a comment, let us know what you think about this story. And here's the thing. What we would like most for you to do is just tell someone who you think might enjoy this show. Maybe put it on a Twitter thread or a Reddit post or suggest it in your family text chains. I don't know what you do.
Hire a blimp.
Why not ride it in the sky with an airplane? Thank you so much for listening to Remember, and don't forget, mincemeat is better eaten as a pie and not as a name for a spy operation, like we always say. I'm Paula.
And I'm the dark man, the shadow in the background, the person who was there, the slim bit of light between the endless vast nothingnesses that compiled this world. I'm the man who didn't know enough to know too much, never knew. Am I even here?
Not anymore, because it's the end. Bye, everyone.